Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, amma ba'd. We're looking now from talking about what ruqya is. You now know methods that you can use for performing ruqya. You now know how you should be as an individual and how your patient should be as a person. So now we kind of come down to boil everything we've done down from the last day and a half into the actual ruqya session itself. And let's split the ruqya session into before, during and after. And there's no doubt that certainly the things we're going to mention here will give you an indication. They will not give you everything. Eventually, your experience and your learning and your seeking knowledge will continue to add to the information that you have that you're going to use in this ruqya session. However, ya ikhwan, and I really want to emphasize this, I want you people sitting here today to practice ruqya. I want you to go out and to give, to do and perform ruqya upon people. I don't want you to leave this as, I heard some words about ruqya and I learned a few things, and then go back and do nothing. I want you guys to get involved, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And that might be in partnership with someone, that might be with your family, that might be beginning with your local area, because we are in desperate need of people who are going to take on this responsibility for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Before the ruqya session, you're going to have a discussion with the patient. Before this, we talk about what this discussion might contain, and reminding you what we said about ordering the good and forbidding the evil. You may want to send your patient some information before they even come, or to have some information present on a website or on your Facebook or whatever before they even come, that sets out certain ground rules in order to come and join the good and to forbid the evil. So you say straight up, if you're going to come to me, my sister in Islam, you're going to come with hijab. And if you're not coming with hijab, then I'm not coming to do ruqya on you. And you can put it nicer than that, but I'm trying to emphasize to you in a way that you are going to be ordering the good and forbidding the evil. And you're not going to be compromising, and you're going to be bearing in mind the information we've heard about the raqi and the family. So before the session, and this is very important, manage your time. And I say this because this is something that I feel that I haven't done brilliantly in the past. You can get talking to someone about their experiences, and there's only 2 minutes left for the ruqya, and you manage to read al-Fatiha and they go. Why? Because the shaitan wants anything to delay, anything that the shaitan can do to stop you reading, any single method the shaitan can use to stop you reading, he will do so. And they can't do anything unless Allah Azza wa Jal wills for it to happen. So do manage your time. Set yourself an idea of how long you want the conversation to take. Some certain patients will talk forever. They will talk again and they will mention, and someone will come to you and say, some of these patients have been suffering for 20, 30 years. And they want to tell you what happened in that 20, 30 years. And that, for your purpose of your ruqya, can mean that there is no recitation of the Quran. So the first thing I want to talk about before the session is give it a proper time. Have it in your mind that I'm going to chat to them. Get the important information out, and try to ask the questions that are the most pertinent, that are the most valuable questions to what you're going to do. Some of the ulama benefit this from the hadith of the hadith of the tabi'i, which leads to the hadith of Ibn Abbas about those who do not seek ruqya. When the scorpion stung that tabi'i, and he said, the other one said to him, what did you do? Look at the value of the question. He was stung by a scorpion, and the shaykh, he said, many people would say this days, what color was it? Was it a big scorpion or a small scorpion? Really? Did it hurt? Did the poison go into you? What happened? Then what did you do with the scorpion? He's asking questions that have nothing to do with the issue. Look at the tabi'i, what's he want? He wants the ilm shar'i, he wants the benefit. And he says, what did you do so that I can evaluate and advise you whether you did the right thing or the wrong thing? So ask valuable questions, insha'Allah ta'ala. Try to give yourself a bit of an idea. Of course, da'wah is extremely valuable, and you may begin a ruqya session with da'wah, and da'wah may be the only thing you deal with. Because at the end of the day, your calling them to Tawheed is critical to their success and their cure. But we want generally if you extend this period, we want it to be extended because you wanted to extend it, not because the shaitan wanted to stop you from reciting. Okay? So if you decide to take the full hour or 2 hours to talk to them about Tawheed, that's fine. But make sure that that's your decision. I'll give you a little tip about how to make sure these things are your decision. Try to decide things before the patient comes to you. And the only reason I say this is, the shaitan will come to you throughout the ruqya, try to get you to stop, oh, you're too tired, I'll just stop here. What I try to do is I have in my mind before the patient comes, at a time when inshallah the shaitan is less close and less likely to afflict me, I have in my mind I'm going to recite inshallah approximately this amount of the Quran. I'm going to take approximately this length of time. Just an approximation in your mind. Because if you have in your mind, inshallah I'm intending to recite 1/3 of Surah Al-Baqarah upon this patient, then try to stick to it and don't let the shaitan stop you and say, oh, I'm really tired, I'll just leave it at the first page, inshallah next week we'll carry on. So be aware of that. Try before the session to focus yourself before you even see the patient. What am I going to ask? What do I need to know? Another technique for this is to have the majority of this discussion before the patient even comes to see you. Get them to write it down in an email, get them to send you a message, a text message, whatever it is, so that you can get the majority of the time that you're with them to be the recitation of the Quran, calling them to the haqq. Yeah, you may talk to them in session, how long have you been suffering? You send some questions by email, they get back to you, you then send them some material, and you save yourself a whole lot of time. You also save yourself from having to remember everything in one go. So try, if you can, to extrapolate some of these discussions and make them happen by email or by phone. The reason I tell you this is, the shaitan is desperate to stop you from the performance of the ruqya, and some patients, there is no limit to the amount of information that they want to give you. And so you say, in general, if it gets too long, Jazakallahu khairan, it's very beneficial. If you could write this down for me in an email, I will inshallah ta'ala look at it. Let's get on with the Quran. However, there are some things that you do need to focus on before you begin the session. Ask about the details. Ask how long they have been suffering. Ask about their history. This is just simple good practice. It's simple best practice. It's what a doctor would do. It's what anybody in this circumstance would do. Get a bit of history. How long have you been suffering for? What kind of symptoms do you have? Try not to prompt the person overly such that you put words in their mouth. A lot of ruqah do this. So do you see dreams of snakes? I see dreams of snakes. Scorpions? Do you see this, that, the other? Did you possibly do this? Did you do this? And they're just basically deciding the issue beforehand. Try to you can prompt them from time to time. But when you prompt them, try to let them discuss what they're talking about and say what they want, and then ask certain questions. Okay, you mentioned that you have nightmares, and you mentioned that your nightmares are like this and this and this. Have you seen such and such a thing in your nightmare? So then you can get more specific. Okay? So, how long have you been suffering? When and how did it begin? When and how did it begin? Because you're trying to get a hypothesis in your mind, a basic prognosis, something that you can build upon and sort of adjust as you progress through your relationship with the patient. You may want to talk about yourself, your ground rules, certain things you want the patient to do. I want you to do these adhkar, I want you to do this and this and this. But when you do so, do not overburden the patient. Do not give them more than they can do. I was with Sheikh Adil Muqbil, hafidhahullah, and the Sheikh, he was advising people to do the adhkar, and he was only advising people to do a few short adhkar. And I said, Sheikh, Or one of the sisters asked from the sister's side, Shaykh, there are many other adhkar. Why haven't you told them this one and this one? Shaykh said, do not burden with people with things that they cannot do. To the point where you're asking them, I want you to do 30 minutes of dhikr after Fajr and 30 minutes after Maghrib. Because on the day when they have work and they can't spend 30 minutes, they won't do any. But if you give them 2 minutes to do, they will always do it bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And the most beloved deeds to Allah are those that are continuous, even if they are few. So you're asking them, you may be telling them some things about yourself, reminding them about Tawheed and so on and so forth. You ask them about their history, when and how did it begin. You may ask them about their dreams. Dreams are something that it requires a great deal of care in. Because it's very easy to make mistakes when it comes to dreams, and it's very easy to let the shaitan lead you down a path. By the shaitan showing certain nightmares and falsehoods in dreams that you interpret in a certain way, and you base everything upon them, and then you completely end up as a puppet of the shaitan. And if Allah Azza wa Jal wills, inshaAllah ta'ala, I will bi'idhnillahi ta'ala deliver a seminar on dreams and dream interpretations, inshaAllah ta'ala. Not in terms of how you can be an interpreter of dreams, but the basic principles of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah regarding the interpretation of dreams. Those of you who speak Arabic, you will find on the website of Ansar al-Sunnah in Egypt a set of lectures by Shaykh Adil al-Sayyid Hafidhahullah on the principles of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah regarding interpreting dreams. And this is important, ya ikhwan. It's important that you distinguish between what the soul is telling them, what the soul is instructing them, or what the soul is inclined towards, the truthful dreams that are from Allah Azza wa Jal, and those evil dreams that are from the shaitan. But dreams do play a part, and you will develop your knowledge in this. In English, you may wish to read the book of Shaykh Muhammad al-Jibali, Hafidhahullah ta'ala, on dream interpretation. It is extremely beneficial and it will help you a great deal. Ask them if they have any ta'weed. Ask them if they've been to anyone else. This is not to set the ruqa against each other, to set the raqis against each other, that you and me are going to fight each other, don't go to this brother, you know, and so on and so forth, but simply for you to get an idea about the people they've been. Sometimes I get someone and he says, will you read on me? I say, okay, who have you been to? He says, I've been to Abu Ibrahim. So straight away, I want to ask our brother Abu Ibrahim, what did you do? Why are you not still going to him? Maybe the brother became busy, maybe something transpired, maybe there was something that the patient couldn't do, maybe they didn't like the advice that Abu Ibrahim wanted to give them and they didn't want to hear it and they just want to look around for a raqi until he gives them something that they want to do. Maybe they'll say, oh, I've been to such and such an imam, and you know this imam is a magician or is someone who's involved in magic. Did he give you anything? Did he give you something to drink, something to wear? Oh yes, he gave me. Do you still have it? What have you done with it? And so you build up a history. With regard to the sisters, ya ikhwan, fitnatun nisa. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the greatest fear, or one of the greatest fears that he had, أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, is the fear of women. The fear for you of the fear of women. And the first thing to misguide the children of Israel was the fear of women. And as a raqi, you will soon learn that the majority of cases that you will deal with will be cases involving women in general, for a lot of the people who perform ruqya. And so you must set down your stall before you begin. You must set down absolute strict rules. You come with a mahram. I can't come with a mahram. Why? My mahram, he's busy. Come when he's not busy. The mahram will save you from so much evil. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. The mahram will save you from so many things and so many problems. Ya ikhwan, you don't need to stare at the sister. You don't need to look her in the eyes with a long soulful glance just to see whether you think you can see the ayn in there, or whether you think you'd like to marry her as well. Akhi, wallah, we might joke about it, but wallahi, how many ruqa we have seen with our own eyes and heard about with our own ears that have gone down this route. You don't need to stare at her. For me personally, one of the things that I do is I prefer to read on her from behind. So I would ask her to sit in front of me and I will keep more than an arm's distance. Why? Because it stops me getting the urge to go like this, from the shaitan or from myself. What's the ayah in Surah Yusuf? لا أبرئ نفسي. I don't claim that I myself am pure. I'm not going to say that I myself are pure and holy and I would never dream. I'm going to put the asbab, I'm going to put those causes there. So I'm going to sit a little bit further than an arm's length so that I'm not going to jump over. And I might go up to her and read in her ear at some point. But in the beginning, I'm just going to set my stall out. I'm not looking at her unless I need to look at her. Sure, if something's jumping around, I might look at that place where it's jumping around. But in general, I'm going to keep a general observation without me staring at her. You could ask the mahram. The mahram say, look, keep an eye on her. If you see something, let me know. Give me a shout if I miss something. You're being commanded to lower your gaze. Don't make ruqya the exception to the rule. If you need to look, you need to look. But what is need, ya ikhwan? What is darura? Darura is eating the meat of a pig. Darura is eating the meat of a pig because there's nothing else there to eat. You're going to die. Darura is not pork is cheaper than chicken, so I'm going to buy pork today. Darura is not snipe me up a nice fat bacon sandwich with loads of ketchup on there because I just really want to enjoy the bacon that I'm eating. If you were eating pork, you would eat the minimum that you need to eat and you would almost be disgusted by it to the minimum extent that you had to just to keep yourself alive. This is darura. Darura is not, okay, sister, sit down, let me put my hands on you, let me have a look at you. Don't worry about that hijab, it's not majorly important. This is what we are seeing from so many of the ruqah, so many people. If you have a female relative like a mahram with you as well, that assists you, this is one of the greatest things that the women can do in ruqya. And in general, a woman, in general, in jihad fi sabilillah, we advise that, in general, that the women have a different role to play. But one of the major roles that the women have to play in ruqya, and there are some women who are able to do ruqya like men are, but in general, one of the major roles the women have to play is assisting and supporting. Have a sister there to correct that girl's hijab. Have a sister there to look after her. Someone who's a mahram for you, who's there, who's going to sort of look after her and make sure she's okay and keep her covered and keep an eye on you. Because trust me, you're not in front of your wife, you're not going to do anything. If you don't fear Allah Azza wa Jal, then at the minimum you're going to fear her, subhanAllah. So, try your best. It's not always possible, but keep that fear of Allah as being the primary thing. Bring her mahram with her. If you can't bring her mahram with her because she's a revert sister, she hasn't got a mahram at all, she doesn't have anyone who can be with her, then at least make sure there is no khalwa. Make sure there's another sister comes with her from her side. And try to have someone from your side as well. Why would you have someone from your side? To make sure that if there are any accusations of something improper, that there is someone with you who can back you up. It's not common, but it does happen from time to time. Some people have illnesses and diseases in their hearts, and they'll say this happened and that happened, and it's useful for you to be able to cut that door for the shaitan and say, alhamdulillah, I have myself a ruqya partner. It's not always possible to have a ruqya partner, but it's nice when you do have one. They remind you of what you forget, they correct you if you make a mistake in the Quran, they support you, they help you, they stay with you, they look after when you want water bringing, they bring it for you, and you swap over when your voice is hurting, they'll recite for a bit. It's lovely to have a ruqya partner, and it's really useful in times when you've got a new patient you don't know, because you don't know what might be accused, male or female. It's good to have a ruqya partner with you if you can. It's not always possible, and if it's not possible, trust in Allah Azza wa Jal. But this sister who she doesn't have a mahram for whatever reason, then the minimum that you need to do is to bring a trustworthy sister with her. Not another little young girl who you might like to marry as well, but a reliable sister, one of the aunties, one of the elder sisters, or one of the sisters who's known for her responsibility and she's known for her fiqh in the deen. Because this is going to keep you further away from falling into sin and from falling into that which is going to ruin your ruqya and ruin your success in what you're doing, because Allah Azza wa Jal is not going to give you tawfiq when you are disobeying Him in this way. And it gets like a disease, it gets worse and worse and worse, until the Raqi says, I only read on women. And send me a photo first and I'll tell you if I'm going to read on you or not. Wallah, I'm not telling you something that's never happened, ya ikhwan. Wallahi, I'm not telling you something that's never happened. I'm telling you things that we have heard of, that we have seen, that we have witnessed, that we have read about, that we've seen with brothers on Facebook and elsewhere, stories from patients. It has got to this stage, ya ikhwan. Fear the fitna of women and stick to the limits set by Allah Azza wa Jal. Ask them about their prayer. If they're not praying, you have a major issue you need to deal with first. And for me, I divide patients into categories according to the severity of what they're suffering. And from the most severe of patients that I consider to be the most deserving of treatment are those who have been told that they're going to die. So those who are being told that they're critically ill and they're going to die, you're going to give them priority. Those who are not praying or not practicing the deen at all, because if they die in this state, they die upon other than Islam. So you are not going to say to someone who says, oh, you know, you read Quran, I had a light headache, and otherwise I was fine, and I can read Quran on myself, and you have another person who the doctor's given a week to live. Judge it and give priority to those people. Maybe you might want to set out at this point your stall with regard to your commitment. And honestly, I advise you, ya akhi, don't promise them. Don't promise them the earth. Promise them that you will do the best for them that you can do with the circumstances that Allah Azza wa Jal gives you. Because subhanAllah, it sometimes turns out that the person will say, you promised me that you would be with me until it went, and Allah Azza wa Jal puts a difficulty for you in this. So be careful before you make this commitment, and try to advise people that, look, what I'm doing for you is I'm going to do the best that I can for you. I'm going to read on you today. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, I will continue that for as long as Allah Azza wa Jal gives me the ability, but your trust is in Allah. And so if Allah Azza wa Jal does not give me the ability to continue, at least Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put someone in your path who will be able to do that for you. Questions linked to the situation, and sometimes these questions can give you a very good idea of what the person's suffering from. You've got a lot of knowledge now about ayn, about sihr. Has this been done? Did you go to this person? Was there an amulet? Did it have this on it? You can start to ask very pertinent questions to the situation. So I'm going to pass the mic over to our brother Abu Ibrahim, inshallah ta'ala, if he has anything to add on that part and to take us through the beginning of the recitation and what you are going to do during the session, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Okay, so our beloved brother, hafidhahullah, he's taken us through before. So now you are prepared. You are prepared, and now we are getting to the actual session. The actual session of Ruqya. And really this is, subhanallah, like we've mentioned, really we're reaching the peak now of this session, of our conference. This is what it's all boiled down to. And the knowledge that we have sought, everything else, this is where your aqeedah, this is where your tawakkul, this is where your ilm, everything now is coming together, and you're going to see it now, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. The first thing is, during the session, you need to go into the session with the correct attitude. You yourself need to go into the session with the correct attitude. Make dua. Make dua before you go into the session. Humble yourself before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make tawbah, make istighfar before you go into the session. Now, the patient has arrived and we're in the session now. And as our brother has mentioned, perhaps they have a lot of details that they want to talk to you about. You need to limit this now. You need to be in control of the conversation. You're asking the questions without leading them on. Now, do you want this patient to sit down, or do you want this patient to lie down? Is this patient going to sit down, or are they going to lie down? And are they going to sit in a place where there is impending danger? If this person is possessed and suddenly they jump up, are they going to hit their head on something sharp? If suddenly they fall back, are they going to bang their head on something? If suddenly they make a dart for you or a dart for something else, are you prepared? So make sure that your environment is one which is safe. Make sure that there is a safe environment in which to do the ruqya. Make sure that it is an environment where you're not going to be constantly disturbed. There shouldn't be children running around. There shouldn't be phones going off in the background. There shouldn't be children screaming or people talking over. Make sure that the environment is one which is conducive to ruqya. This is extremely, extremely important. Now with the sisters, I advise that the sisters are not made to lie down, simply because of exposing their body, etc. It's probably better that the sisters are made to sit down. If you do want the sister to lie down, perhaps have a thin blanket or a thin veil that you can throw over the sister so as to preserve the shape of her body so that it covers her. You can't see that. Again, for your protection and also for the protection of the sister from the whisperings of the shayateen. When the Quran is recited, make sure that you tell the patient, make sure that you tell the mahram, make sure that you tell your ruqya partner, do not play on your phone, do not talk, do not come in and out of the room needlessly. Make sure that when the Quran is recited, that the people are listening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions when the Quran is recited, listen it attentively, in order that you may receive mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can we expect to have the mercy and shifa from Allah when you're talking over Quran, or you're reciting and that person is playing on their phone, laughing and joking on WhatsApp, Facebook, whatever it might be? Make sure that everybody in that room is listening to the Quran. Make sure that they are listening to the Quran. Now, we can start with those ayat or those surahs that our brother mentioned. So, Surah Al-Fatiha. So first, make or seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. You want to cover this or should I? Okay. And then, the Basmala. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What we are doing now, it is in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, you can start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Start with those surahs which are mentioned in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Recite this 3 times, 7 times, or an odd number if you want to read more than that. Then you can focus on Ayatul Kursi. Focus on Ayatul Kursi. Recite this as many times as you like. Again, 3 times, 5 times, 7 times, an odd number of times. Then you can recite the last 2 ayahs of Surah Al-Baqarah. Aman al-Rasul. You can recite this again 3 times, 5 times, 7 times. And again, ya ikhwan, we need to point something out here. For us, if somebody comes and says, recite this 7 times, don't recite it less than that. We need to say to them, bring a proof. Because for somebody to say to you, recite something a certain number of times, you need to have an evidence for this. You need to have daleel from the Quran and the Sunnah that you need to put a number onto something. There needs to be an evidence for this. So I'm just saying recite something an odd number of times, but from experience, if you start reciting 15, 17, 19 times, it's going to become very difficult for you. You're not going to be able to cover all of the different surahs if you're reciting every single one 21 times, You're going to have a session that lasts you 5 hours. So this is why we say 3, 5, 7 or more than that. But this is for you to judge as you become more experienced, as you gain in knowledge as to what works for you, what doesn't work for you. You can tailor your ruqya session to yourself. Every single raqi has his own methodology, has his own unique way. But again, we focus on the Quran. We mention those surahs which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned. So we focus on the last 2 ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah. Then if you wish, you can then go to Surah Ikhlas, Surah Falaq, Surah Nas. Surah Ikhlas, Surah Falaq, Surah Nas, reciting them 3 times each. Now, at this stage, the patient may be sitting there and there's nothing wrong with them whatsoever. Does this mean there's nothing wrong with them? Does this mean there's no sihr? Does this mean there's no jinn or evil eye? No. It does not mean any of that. It does not mean any of that. Sometimes you will recite Surah Al-Fatiha, by the time you get to Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'een, this person is having a fit. But sometimes you will have recited everything that we've mentioned, and subhanallah, there appears to be no reaction, no apparent reaction. Again, ya ikhwan, this does not mean that there is no jinn present, there is no sihr, there is no evil eye. It's extremely important to mention this. Now, you've recited these things. Now, we go on to the second category of the ayat that our brother Hafidhahullah he mentioned. those which have a clear purpose. So those ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions sihr. So for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, the 102nd ayah, Surah Taha, Surah Yunus, Surah Al-A'raf, all of these are surahs where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions sihr. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. We looked at this ayah yesterday, and we looked at 5 points of benefit that can be gained from this ayah. قُلْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ أَنَّهُ اسْتَمَعَ نَفَرٌ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ. This is about the jinn now. So we've talked about the ayat of sihr. Now let's talk about those ayat pertaining to the jinn. Pertaining to the jinn. Those ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're reminding the jinn now. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. You're reminding the jinn now. You were created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those ayat referring to, tawheed, referring to the oneness of Allah, referring to the purpose of creation, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenges mankind and the jinn in Surah Rahman. Ya ma'ashar al-jinn. Go past the boundaries of the heavens and the earth, or the boundaries of the heavens. But you're not going to be able to do that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenging now. Challenging us. This is for us to humble ourselves. But all the while, ya ikhwan, you as Iraqi, you need to be calm. You need to be composed. You should not be panicking. You should not be outside of your comfort zone visibly. Subhanallah. Why? Why, if you start panicking, this is what's going to happen. The patient is going to think he doesn't know what he's doing. He is as out of his depth as I am. If you yourself are panicking and visibly you're shaking and trembling, etc., the patient is going to lose all trust in you. Imagine you go to the doctor and you tell the doctor about your illness and the doctor faints. Subhanallah. Are you going to have any trust in this doctor? No. You're going, this man doesn't know what he's talking about. So subhanallah, keep yourself calm, keep yourself composed. If there is jinn and the jinn sees you panicking, the jinn sees you losing composure, the jinn knows now, I can scare this one, I can threaten this one, I can intimidate this one. You need to be calm, composed. What does this come from? Your aqeedah. Nothing is going to harm me or befall upon me except what Allah has written for me. Nothing is going to benefit me except what Allah has already written for me. Complete trust, reliance in Allah. So be calm, be composed. So you are reciting these ayat now of sihr. You are reciting these ayat now of sihr. And again, there is no real reaction. Does this mean that there's no sihr? No. Does this mean that there's no jinn? No. And then you go into the third category. You recite whatever you like. All of the Quran is shifa. If you want to go back to Surah Fatiha, go ahead. If you want to go to those to the azkar mentioned by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, go ahead. Recite whatever you like from the Quran, from the Sunnah which is authentic from the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, let's look at some details now. Let's go into some details now. You begin reciting. You begin reciting and immediately this person, they begin to fit. They begin to start having fits. They begin to tremble. They begin to sweat. They begin to tell you stop reciting. They begin screaming. Is this a particular link to sihr? Is it a particular link to jinn possession in and of itself? Or is it a particular link to ayn? Again, now we have seen that there is a reaction. What do? Do we stop now and say, what's going on? How do you feel? Why are you here? No. Continue with the recitation. You have established the first point now. The Quran is causing some discomfort. The Quran is causing a reaction now. So what do? You continue, you increase in your recitation of the Quran. Now you are focusing on the ayat of sihr. You are focusing on the ayat of sihr, and when you are reciting Surah Fatiha, you are reciting Ayatul Kursi, you are reciting the last two of Surah Baqarah, there is one reaction. But now you focus on the ayat of sihr, and subhanallah, when you start focusing on the ayat of sihr, this person begins to go wild. You notice that the ayat of sihr, they are having a different effect to the ayat or the general ayat mentioned in the sunnah. Subhanallah. Now we are, as the brother mentioned, we are beginning to form a theory in our mind. I'm reciting these things. When I recite the ayat of sihr, I get a much more pronounced reaction. I get a much more pronounced reaction. Two things to be wary of now. Do not jump to sihr. Do not jump to try and diagnose this. Why? Because it may be that the shaitan is trying to mislead you. It may be jinn possession. And the jinn, when you are reciting the ayat of sihr, increases in its reaction to try and mislead you, to send you down the path of sihr, when it's actually the jinn is in love with this person. So be very careful. Be careful of the shayateen trying to mislead you. And the second thing, do not jump to a diagnosis, rather continue with your recitation. Now if you've done all of this, ikhwan, and you've recited for like an hour and you haven't seen or heard anything, does this mean that there is nothing going on? Does this mean that there's nothing going on? No. What this means is that you need to continue and increase in your recitation of Quran. Sometimes the jinn is present in that person's body, but it's hiding. It's trying its best to try and hide from you. It's doing its best to keep itself concealed. Because if it knows that if it openly comes out, then khalas, it's been caught, there's no way out now. So it tries to hide within this person's body. Some things to look out for. Is there any twitching going on? Sometimes you're reciting and there's no real reaction except for a minor twitching of the finger. All you can see is the finger is just moving up and down, or there's a bit of twitching in the shoulders or in the face or in the neck. When you see this twitching, then grab it. When you see this twitching, then grab it. Make sure, ya ikhwan, that you focus and you are aware. This is why we said the raqi, he needs to be aware. He needs to be aware. But ya ikhwan, when you grab this finger, do not grab this finger and twist it back until it breaks. And your argument is, I'm causing harm to the jinn. No, be very careful. If you take a knife and you chop his head off and say, I killed the jinn, you've also killed the patient as well. So use pressure or use force within its correct, within its correct limits. If you take a baseball bat and you start breaking his ribs, when he comes back, he's going to have broken ribs. If you break his arm, when he comes back, you will have broken his arm. So be very careful, ya ikhwan. We have these people, they go overboard in beating. They go overboard in putting pressure, physical pain upon the jinn. Just know its limits. As we've mentioned, the backbone, the main core of our treatment is what? It is the Quran. It is the Quran. If this Quran was sent on a mountain, the mountain would turn to dust. If you stood on a mountain, would the mountain turn to dust? No. What's more powerful? The Quran, by the permission of Allah. Use this as your core treatment. And these are just things to try and cause a bit of excess. Like the cherry on top of the cake, shall we say. This is just a little bit on top. It shouldn't be your main thing. Do not put pressure or do not be touching up on the sisters. Again, fear the fitna of the women. If I see that woman's hand is twitching, I will say to her mahram, grab her hand and squeeze. Grab her finger and squeeze. I don't need to touch. I can say to the one who has accompanied her, this is why he's here. So I don't need to touch. This is why he's here. So I don't need to put pressure on. Say to the mahram, you do it on my behalf. Okay, this is extremely important. And if you see, subhanallah, do it lightly. If you do it lightly and you get it wrong, then no matter. But if I come with like if I have a fork and this person's finger is twitching and I stamp the fork in his finger, I've caused him some pain now, subhanallah. Shaitan is going to use that against me. He doesn't know what he's doing. This raqi doesn't know what he's doing. Go and find somebody else. He doesn't need to hit you. Shaitan is going to use your ammunition against you. Whereas if I grab it lightly and I squeeze and I don't get a reaction, alhamdulillah, I haven't made myself look like a fool. Okay, so just lightly. There's no need for excess pressure. There's no need for excess beating. Anything else on this with regards? What to do if the jinn speaks? Okay, so now we are reciting and the jinn begins to speak. It is a woman and a very deep man's voice begins to come out of her mouth. Okay? Ya ikhwan, when I tell you these things, you're probably sitting here thinking, subhanallah, and you feel some element of fear. When you're in this situation, wallahi, Allah gives you this tawfiq, you feel no fear whatsoever. You will not, I promise you, when you're in this situation, you're immersed in it, you feel no fear whatsoever. So many people who've accompanied me with Ruqya, we've got the brothers started in Ruqya, when you say these type of things, they say, subhanallah, you know, when you were explaining it, I felt a bit scared. But when I was in that situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just guides you. You are mujahid fi sabilillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show you a way out. You don't fear an ounce of fear. You will not feel an ounce of fear, I promise you. And if you begin to feel some fear, just control it. قُلْنَا لَا تَخَفْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْأَعْلَى. We said to Musa, do not fear, you are going to be victorious. You have the Quran, you have Iman, you have Tawheed, you have reliance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first thing, do not become scared or do not panic. Do not stop your recitation of the Quran. If the jinn speaks and the first thing that you do is, oh my God, what's going on? Then the jinn knows. The jinn knows now, this is what I'm going to get him by. Every time he recites and you know I feel some pain, I just got to speak and he's going to get scared. No, whatever you do, do not stop the recitation. There may be external jinn. Perhaps cushions are moving themselves around the room whilst you're reciting. Perhaps the door is banging whilst you are reciting. The last thing that you should do in this situation, ya ikhwan, is stop. Continue with the recitation. Make sure that the person is safe, the person is sound. What should you do in this situation? Now the jinn is speaking. Like our brother has mentioned, the main thing, the jinn will do anything, the shaitan will do anything to stop you from reciting. So please do not get involved in long drawn out conversations with the jinn. Do not get involved. Make this one of your principles. I will not get involved in long conversations with the jinn, except with one purpose, which is to leave this person's body. Leave this slave of Allah. You are oppressing him. Fear Allah. If you don't leave, we are going to kill you. Keep your statements short and snappy and don't get involved in long conversations. Because what are you doing? When you're speaking, what are you not doing? You're not reciting. So when you're not reciting, what are you doing? You're allowing your enemy time to recover. Imagine you're in a boxing match and you've given this guy a haymaker and he's completely dazed. What are you going to do now? How are you feeling, mate? You okay? Did you feel it? No. You're going to keep beating him and beating him and beating him. And you're going to beat him until he's down and out. The same thing with the shaitan. Once you've got it to the situation where it's tried to hide in his body, but you've burnt it with Quran, it can't hide anymore. You've caught it moving through his body. You've pressed that part of the body. You've caught it now in his neck. You've caught it in his finger. And it starts to speak, now leave me alone, please don't kill me, etc., etc. Are you now going to give it respite? Are you going to give it the chance? No. You order it, you say, look, I don't want to oppress you. I'm warning you, if you do not leave, we are going to kill you by the permission of Allah. We expect reward from Allah. Allah says, فَقَاتِلُوا أَوْلِيَاءَ الشَّيْطَانِ. You are from the awliya of shaitan because you are oppressing him. You are causing harm to him. You are trying to mislead him. You are trying to kill him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward me yawm al-qiyamah. I'm not afraid to kill you bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Don't spend ages talking about Illuminati, talking about the Freemasons, talking about Iblis, talking about all of these different things. Ikhwan, I promise you, if you started right now, you could keep talking to this jinn until Fajr time. And it wouldn't stop. Why? Because while you're talking, you're not reciting. Do not take anything that jinn tells you as the truth. Rather, take it with a huge pinch of salt. If it agrees with the Quran and the Sunnah, we agree with it. But if it is something that is not mentioned, we do not affirm it, nor do we deny it. Okay? But you shouldn't be getting involved in this level of depth of conversation. Don't ask them, tell me what are your different tribes, what are your different clans, etc., etc. I'll mention to you, there's a video on YouTube and this brother has put the video up and it said, the grandson of Iblis. The grandson of Iblis possesses this man. and the video, all he has done is lots of speaking to the jinn, and the jinn says, I'm a Muslim, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the Iblis's grandson, I've possessed him, this is my name, blah blah blah. That brother came to visit me, we began reciting, the jinn began to speak. I said, you're thick. Did you think that we would think that you are the Iblis's grandson? He said, yeah, that boy is easy to fool. Referring to the other Raqi, he just takes everything. Just speak. Ya ikhwan, do not engage in excess conversation with the jinn. You need to command the jinn to leave. Command the jinn to leave the body. Leave his body. Why are you here? What do you want with him? Leave his body. And if it's a Muslim, then you tell them to fear Allah. And if it's a non-Muslim, you tell them to fear Allah. You remind them that they were not created without purpose. Again, enjoining the good, forbidding the evil, but to a limit. Do not think that you are the zakir naik of the Muslim world. Do not take it upon you to give da'wah to the jinn. Because honestly, ya ikhwan, you will misguide yourself. You cannot see them. This is something of the unseen. So we only say what we need to, and we don't go further than that. Leave his body or I will kill you bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Whatever you do, ya ikhwan, do not ever make a pact with the jinn. Do not ever seek assistance from the jinn. Never call upon the jinn. Never call upon the Prophet ﷺ or any other pious people or anything like this. Again, comes back to our aqidah. He says to you, and he offered our brother Muhammad, hafidhahullah, I will give you women and I will give you wealth. And we were there, subhanallah. They will say anything and everything. But subhanallah, as our brother did, hafidhahullah, he reminded him, what is with Allah is better. What Allah can give me is better. I do not want what you think you can give me. Rather, everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some other things that the jinn might do, he might begin to threaten you. I know where you live. I'm coming for you. If you don't stop reciting, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your children. I'm going to kill your wife. I know about you. I know your secrets, everything. The threats are endless. You will hear all manner of threats. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. You say, yeah, no worries, don't worry, carry on. And you just carry on with your recitation. Don't take any notice of them whatsoever. Why are they threatening you? Again, what's the aim and the objective? Is that you stop the ruqya. Never become scared. Always, ikhwan, remember this principle. When I go into a ruqya session, what Allah has written for me is going to happen. What Allah has written and it's not going to reach me is not going to happen. Everything is written by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this jinn says to you, yeah, I'm going to harm you, I'm going to do this. You say, no problem. You do what you can. You will not be able to do anything except what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to do. Now, sometimes you may want to ask the jinn, why are you there? But don't ask this at the beginning, you know. Sometimes you'll get to such a situation, you have recited and you have burnt the Quran, burnt the jinn, and the jinn is in a desperate situation, and so the jinn will tell you, I'm here through sihr, I'm here because I love him, etc. Again, do we take this as fact? No. If the jinn wants to tell you, then just accept it. But don't take this as fact now, khalas, this is the truth, and you tell the person afterwards, you have magic, you have this, the magic is in such and such a location, such and such a location, and the person says, how did you know? And you say, oh, because the jinn told me. Subhanallah. How did you seek clarification of this? Allah says, if an evildoer comes to you, seek clarification of that which he says. If he comes to you with some news, seek clarification. We cannot seek clarification, so we neither affirm it nor do we deny it. With regards to touching the sisters, I want our brother Muhammad, hafidhahullah, to mention this in a bit more detail, inshallah.
طيب, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Some of the ruqa, they are very free when it comes to touching women, as we mentioned. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, for an iron nail to be driven through your skull is better for you than for you to touch a woman who is not permissible for you to touch, or as he said sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For an iron nail to be driven through your skull is better for you than this. Some of the Raqis, they will turn around and they will say, Ya akhi Muhammad, you've made a mistake in this because this is darura. what do we say to them? We say to them, Ya akhi, darura is eating pork. This is darura. Meaning you do it to the minimum that you need to do to live. So bearing in mind this issue of darura and necessity, when would we or when might we consider or when might we need to or might it be a necessity for us to touch a woman in ruqya? I have three situations or three broad circumstances in which you would consider it to be a necessity for you to touch a woman in ruqya. But there is a supplementary point to make on this, and that is that if there is a mahram there that can do it, you never need to. If there is a mahram there that can do it, you never, ever, ever need to. But we are talking about three circumstances when there is no mahram, or the mahram is unable, and that has happened sometimes. The jinn is incredibly strong and the mahram is just being thrown against the wall. You may at that point need to make a judgment call. And I will, before I mention these three conditions, I will mention to you again. Every time this happens to me, I sit with my ruqya partner and I say to him, advise me, Ya akhi al-kareem, did I go too far? Did I touch her when I didn't need to? And we have a discussion afterwards where we evaluate whether or not this was necessary and whether or not we need to change our practice. Could we have avoided it? For example, sometimes in the way that you have the woman sit, you could have avoided her getting up and punching her mahram in the face. For example, you could have stood in a way to block her that you didn't need to touch her. So two preconditions. One is that when the mahram is there, you never, ever, ever need to touch the woman. There's never a necessity. How can there be a necessity when there's someone stood next to you? That you're just going to buy pork because it's £2 cheaper than chicken. That's all you're doing. Secondly, always take yourself to account. If you did something that was haram in the religion because it was a necessity, take yourself to account. Ask yourself, evaluate yourself afterwards. Could I have avoided this? Is there something I could have done? What are the three conditions or the three situations? Two of them are very easy and one of them is a bit of a grey area and it requires a bit of fiqh and a bit of knowledge. Regarding the two that are easy, the most important reason why you would touch a woman who is not your mahram in ruqya is if she tries to self-harm. I'm not talking about just starts to scratch herself. She runs for the kitchen knife and she goes to stab herself. She grabs something and she goes to choke herself to the point where you see that she's unable to breathe and her face is going blue. In this case, do not hesitate. If the mahram can't deal with it, get involved. Get hold of the mahram, get him to do it. If he can't do it, you get involved and you take a hand away so that she can't harm herself. The second circumstance, if she runs at you and she tries to attack you. This is necessity. She comes at you and she starts to put her hands on your neck and she starts to throttle you. It doesn't happen very often. But when it does happen, you're not going to stay there and say, oh, subhanallah, I can't touch you, you're not my mahram, please continue to strangle me. You can take her off to the extent that it's necessary, ya ikhwan. You're eating pork to the extent that it is necessary. Okay, the pork thing helps because none of you would sit there just chewing away on a bacon sandwich, yeah? You understand what necessity is. She attacks you, you restrain her comfortably. It's so important, ya ikhwan. Brothers and sisters, when you are dealing with a patient, go and speak. We have a brother with us, and mashallah, tabarakallah, the brother has some experience in, shall we say, fighting and these kinds of things. And he's benefited me a great deal in how to safely restrain somebody. Keep the person safe. Don't let them choke on their own tongue. Don't let them, hurt themselves. They start punching themselves in the face. You don't, subhanAllah, the way you hold somebody, and I'm not an expert in this, but someone with very little strength can restrain somebody very effectively. The brother advises, for example, that you control the joints and you keep a bit of pressure on the person's shoulder so that they're not able to move, their whole arm is immobilized, it's comfortable for them and it's safe. You're not twisting their arm behind their back to the point that they can't move, you're simply keeping them comfortable and safe. One time there was a situation like this there was a patient, she's a sister, and she's very, very violent during the ruqya. And what happened was, me and the brother, we got into a bit of a disagreement, my ruqya partner, over whether we should touch her or not. And he said, no, leave her until she becomes violent and then touch her. And I said, I think you should restrain her from the beginning. And what happened was, subhanAllah, that this sister went so crazy and so physical and started to attack herself and others that she had to be wrestled to the ground. Now if you imagine wrestling this sister to the ground involved touching her considerably to wrestle someone to the ground. Now you could have avoided that by simply keeping a little bit of pressure on her shoulder, by maybe immobilizing her arm, or even simply by not touching her at all and keeping her in a seat where she can't move. So these are things that you need to be aware of, ya ikhwan. If the sister attacks you, you may need to touch her to the extent that is necessary, not beyond that. Always, always, always err on the side of caution. But there is a time when sometimes you can be too cautious, like in the example where we both refrained from it. We knew she was extremely violent, we both refrained from it, and then she hurt herself quite badly being restrained onto the floor because we didn't take the lighter or the lesser of the two evils and restrain her lightly to begin with. The way that you touch, subhanallah, you don't have to touch her in intimate parts. And this happens from some of the ruqa. You simply, if you want to keep her in one place, you might just simply put some pressure on her shoulder. Again, I'm not an expert in this, but some brothers have shown me some techniques that are for brothers and sisters that are nice, comfortable ways you can keep the person restrained in a comfortable, safe way. You're trying to help them, not to harm them, yeah? You want to keep them nice and comfortable. So those two situations are a primary example. She self-harms, she starts to punch herself in the face, she runs for the kitchen knife, or she begins to harm you and to attack people around you. Again, leave it for the mahram. The mahram deals with it, no problem. Bring 2 mahrams next time, bring 3 next time, make sure the kitchen knives are locked away next time. You may avoid yourself doing it, but there may be circumstances where qaddar Allah wa ma sha'a fa'al, you put yourself in a situation and you got stuck. And you had to do it to the minimum extent necessary. So think about where you're touching. You don't have to touch her bare skin. You could touch over her abaya in a way that's a bit more closer to the limits. You're getting, you're trying to fear Allah. The third circumstance, and this is the tricky one and the grey area, and this is the one that I advise you to fear Allah in until you develop a great deal of experience and knowledge in this field. There may be times when you genuinely believe that you need to touch her in order, or that there is a considerable benefit to her in you touching her in performing her cure. This is a rare circumstance. You can read the Quran, it's enough for you. But you may see the jinn develop in one place and come up like a lump, and you feel that if you were to put pressure on that, then you would be able to significantly increase her cure, or to make her cure significantly quicker. The example of this, and the mashayikh have given this as a fatwa from the lajna and from other than those of the mashayikh, is that your example is the example of a doctor. When you need to do something, you have the permissibility to do it, but do not take that as a license. So many people say, why have you got hold of her? Well, it's important for her cure. It's not. You can recite the Quran. There may be a 1 in 1,000 time when you genuinely, in your heart of hearts, you genuinely believe that you need to touch this sister, and the mahram is not there, there's another sister with her, or the mahram's trying. This is almost a theoretical situation rather than a practical one. It almost never happens. But there may be, and you mentioned the fatwa of the ulama, that you're the example of a doctor, and if you need to do something to bring about someone's cure, you need to do it. But you fear Allah in this regard. How many sisters, subhanAllah, have come to us, and I know Abu Ibrahim is the same, and said, I've come to you because I used to go to so-and-so and he used to touch me. And sometimes you're shy and you say, sister, explain what you mean he used to touch you. He used to grab your arm to stop you hitting yourself. He used to touch me intimately. And he used to say the jinn is in your private parts, the jinn is here, the jinn is there, and I'm following the jinn around the body, and I'm just like a doctor. If your GP did this to you, what would your GP happen to the GP? Subhanallah. Fear Allah with regard to the women. Very, very, very important point, ya ikhwan. Keep the mahram awake. Do not allow khalwa to develop. Khalwa is when you and the woman are alone. Why would you not want khalwa to develop? The Prophet ﷺ said, no man and woman are alone together except the third of them is who? Shaitan. Do you want any more shayateen there in your ruqya session? You've already got plenty to deal with as it is. So don't allow the shaitan to be a third. Keep yourself in a situation where you're controlled. And as I said, you may touch a woman one time because of a need and a necessity, and later on you may say, I can put practices in place that will stop this happening again. Maybe I can keep her a little comfortable. Maybe I can invite a second mahram. Keep the mahram awake. If the mahram dozes off, give him a bit of ruqya water in the face. Keep the mahram awake, yeah? In all seriousness, keep the mahram awake. To nudge him, bro, habibi, don't go to sleep. Because the mahram maybe has a weakness, maybe the shaitan looks to affect him, because the shaitan knows, if you're upon the sunnah, he knows. If he gets the mahram, you're going to leave. So he may try to attack the mahram, and then you need to keep the mahram awake, and at all times you need to keep the patient safe and comfortable, ya ikhwan. Safe and comfortable. Be professional about it. You know, think about this in terms of a hospital, in terms of a doctor. Keep the patient safe and comfortable. Don't allow them to hurt themselves. Don't allow them to choke on their own tongue. Don't allow them to hurt others. Be sensible, be professional. If you can get some knowledge from the ulum of the dunya, the knowledge of the dunya that will help in terms of safe restraining, in terms of, we call it jinjitsu, in terms of safe restraining, in terms of medical treatment to keep someone safe, how to put someone in recovery position, how to make sure someone's airway isn't being blocked by their tongue. These kind of things, it's a beneficial knowledge that you can learn and you can implement in your ruqya to make sure your patients are safe and comfortable at all times. For the last, I guess, few points, inshallah ta'ala, what I'm going to do is hand it over to our brother Abu Ibrahim, Allah yahfadhuh, to inshallah conclude on this session, and maybe also talk a little bit about what you do after the session and how you bring it to a close. In general, all I'll mention in bringing it to a close is, in general, 10-15 minutes a person usually needs to be observed at the end of the ruqya to ensure that they are okay with themselves and that they are sort of comfortable. And that's probably something that you should bear in mind when you've come to a conclusion, you've finished what you'd already decided before that you were going to recite, and you're happy with the conclusion. You bring it to a conclusion, you stop it there, and you're going to observe the person for a short period of time, perhaps 10-15 minutes, to make sure that they are okay, that they're healthy, that the jinn has let go of them, and that you're going to be able to take them away safely. Be careful if they're driving themselves home. You may want to make that considerably longer time. If they're driving themselves home, be so careful that you don't put the person in a state where they're going to harm themselves. So inshallah, to talk about some more points and maybe how to conclude the ruqya session, and I guess maybe a little bit about what we do when the jinn, or how do we know when the jinn leaves and what happens when the jinn leaves, I'm going to hand it over to our brother Abu Ibrahim, hafidhahullah ta'ala.
Okay, Ikhwan, during the ruqya session, you may want to spray some water on the patient. You may find that spraying the water on the patient is extremely beneficial. And subhanallah, it's just water, okay? It's just water, but subhanallah, once it's been recited over, and in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, due to the blessings of Allah, sometimes it has a major effect on the shaitan. It burns them the way acid would burn us. It burns them the way acid would burn us. And this is what we would call, let's say, an alternative or an additional therapy. We'll talk about this slightly later, inshaAllah. Now, whilst you are reciting, if this person begins to feel extremely sick, or the person, their stomach becomes very bloated, then now we are getting into a few of the signs now. Perhaps this is sihr. Perhaps they have eaten something. So from your initial questions, you'll say, tell me, how is your digestive system? Do you get an extremely bad stomach? Do you find, you have irritable bowel syndrome or things like this? These are some of the questions that you'll be able to develop as you gain more knowledge. And the person will say, yeah, I always have a really bad stomach. Anything that I eat goes straight through me. I've had all of the tests and all of the trials in front of the doctors. Nothing seems to be coming back. So now you're beginning again to develop a bit of a theory. Not be firm on a theory. Always be ready, as our brother has told us, always be ready to correct yourself. I thought this, but you know what, I'm going to go back. So the person, now that you are reciting, they're feeling really, really sick. Really, they have a really bad stomach. And they feel like they want to vomit. Again, part of the ruqya, make sure you have a bag or a bin or a bucket, something that they can vomit into if needs be. Something that is available, otherwise they're going to be vomiting on your carpet or on their carpet or on your clothes or on their clothes. So have preparation, have something ready there that they can vomit into if needs be. Sometimes when the sihr is in the stomach, then subhanallah, you may find that when that person is reciting, they feel like vomiting, but something is stopping them. They really feel like they're on the verge of vomiting, but they just can't get it out. Again, we will look at those things which, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, those additional, those bits, add-ons, herbs, medicines, which will inshallah facilitate this. Where should you do the ruqya? Should you do the ruqya in the masjid? Should you do the ruqya outside in the park or in the graveyard? Should you do the ruqya in your own home? The first thing, ya ikhwan, is the best place to do the ruqya is in the masjid. The best place to do the ruqya is in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where there are Muslims from amongst the people, Muslims from amongst the jinn, inshallah, there are angels. This is the best place. This is the best place. And the place that you do the ruqya, it seems to have an effect on the effectiveness of the ruqya. So the ruqya which is performed in Medina is not like the ruqya which is performed in Birmingham. Completely different. It's just the place, ya ikhwan. The barakah which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in that land is not like the barakah or the lack of it that we have here. So the place, it does influence the effectiveness of the ruqya by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You also, as you start doing ruqya on people, you're going to need to be aware. Are you going to be traveling out to them? In this case, take into consideration how long you're going to spend traveling there, how long you're going to spend talking, how long you're going to spend reciting, and then to go back as well. What you don't want to do is your ruqya, it causes you to split from your own wife. You need to think about your own life as well. You need to think about your own lifestyle as well. Your family, it has rights over you. Your body, it has rights over you. Your friends, they have rights over you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this deen has rights over you. Give everything its right. Give everything its due right, ya ikhwan. So are you then going to be somebody who travels out? How far are you willing to travel? How much money are you willing to spend to get to a place? What will you then do, etc., etc. We need to look at this. This is something that you yourself, you need to understand. Now me personally, I do ruqya in my own home. This is due to obviously working 9 to 5, and then obviously I don't have the time to go out and visit people, etc., etc. So I call the people, I invite them into my own home. Things you need to be aware of now. Number one, you're going to have to give your address out to people. Are you prepared to do this? And there may be people who visit you, they're not possessed, they don't have jinn, they are mentally deranged. Do you want this person to have your address? Something to think about. But put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are doing this for His sake and His sake alone. Allah Jalla wa Ala, He will protect you. Your home is going to be a place where you are regularly encountering jinn. Okay, which means that especially your home, you need to make sure that you take precautions to protect your home. When the jinn come, there might be a jinn in this person's body, there may be jinn around this person as well. Okay, which are there to enforce the contract, to make sure that this jinn doesn't leave. You're going to need to make sure that your family are aware of this. Make sure that your family, your children, they are protected. Even more so than if you were doing it elsewhere. Are you going to go into somebody else's home? Are you going to go into somebody else's home and to do the ruqya there? Again, ya ikhwan, all of these things you need to understand. You need to take these things into consideration. If you're doing it in the masjid, you must ask permission from the masjid. Okay? The last thing that that the people who are at the madrasa, the children, the last thing they want is a person screaming and roaring and running around, and you're wrestling them, and they're trying to learn about the Arabic alphabet, subhanallah. So ask permission from your local masjid. And of course, if it's a masjid upon tawheed and sunnah, then you should be doing it there. Do not go to ahlul bid'ah and say, can we use your masjid? There's probably even more shayateen in that masjid than there are in your ruqya cases. So go to the places of tawheed, go to those places of sunnah. Okay, now, how do we decide when to end our situation? When to end our ruqya session? Our brother Muhammad Hafidhullah has mentioned, you've gone in and you've said, right, I'm going to recite a third of Surah Al-Baqarah, I'm going to recite all the ayat of sihr. Now I want to add something to what our brother has mentioned. What happens if you've recited this and towards the end of your recitation, the jinn comes up now? Do you then say, Assalamu alaikum, I've recited what I wanted, end of session? No, you're going to have to add to that now. You've done an hour and a half of recitation. You've reached the peak after 1.5 hours of burning with Quran. The jinn has finally surfaced. Now is our opportunity. Do we just end it there, or do we continue? Continue, ya ikhwan. But you need to know when to stop. You need to know when to stop. Because if you're reciting for 15 hours straight, again, you're not going to want to come back to this person. This person is going to find it physically draining. Again, so many factors that we need to think about. So many things that we need to consider. Okay, first and foremost now. What about if the jinn leaves as a result of your recitation by the grace and permission of Allah? Some things to look out for. Some things to look out for. The jinn is going to want to leave from a particular part of the body. So it may want to leave through a finger. It may want to leave through a foot. It may want to leave through the throat. Don't let it leave through the throat, please, because it may cause damage to the throat. If it leaves through the finger or the arm or the leg, alhamdulillah, these things will recover, but we don't want to cause lasting damage to the person's throat. So if this thing is saying, I want to leave, and the person's mouth is beginning to open up, I advise you say, look, don't leave through his throat because you're going to cause him problems, and then I'm going to cause you problems. Leave through his hand, leave through his foot, whatever it may be. What you will then find is the foot, or say we'll talk from the hand. You say leave through his left hand. Okay, the left hand will probably start vibrating, start shaking, will start lifting up, will start stretching, and the person will really go into, this is like an exceptional circumstance now. You're going to know that things are not right. The hand is shaking, vibrating, it's going up. Perhaps the person's body is lifting up into the air, like what we may have seen in the movies, astaghfirullah. What we may have seen into the movies, you might have seen in the movies, the body's lifting up. These things, you may see these things. You may see these things. Or maybe the leg is lifting up, vibrating very high. The person isn't normally this flexible, but the leg is going so high up into the air, and maybe the person gets lifted off the ground from the leg. All of these things. And then suddenly, bang, nothing. So there is a huge amount of commotion, there is a lot of things going on, and then suddenly, finished. The hand drops, the leg drops, the foot drops, whatever it might be. This now, usually, it is a sign that the jinn may have left. But it may also be a sign that the jinn, it is trying to fool you. It's fooling you into vibrating the hands, etc., and it's fooling you, I'm going. Suddenly it stops, and the jinn has just gone and hid in the back of his leg. And you say, alhamdulillah, you call the person back, end of ruqya, and khalas, and the jinn is hiding is still within his leg. So continue with your recitation even after this type of thing happens and the person seems to wake up and it seems to be this person. Continue with your recitation for another 10-15 minutes just to drill it home. So be aware that this may be that the jinn has actually left, but at the same time it may be that the jinn is trying to fool you. Okay, the jinn hasn't left now. I've recited for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, and I want to bring an end to the session. This is something that I do. Perhaps our brother Muhammad will add or improve on what I do. What I do is I spray, first I make the adhan. I call the adhan in their ear, I spray water on their face, and I call them by their name. You call them back by their name, and alhamdulillah, the person will wake up, and you know, they will wake up and they will feel really, really tired, but alhamdulillah, the person comes back. So you just call them by their name, give them a spray of some water, splash some water on them. Inshallah, we'll see this in the Ruqya session later on. Splash some water on them, call them by their name. Alhamdulillah, the person will come back now. But they usually come back. I've had one case where the person, they seemed to come back, and I had some water that I'd recited on, and it was a sister. I said, here you go, sister, have some water. And it was actually the jinn, and the jinn came and splashed the water all over my face and drenched me. So I thought it was the jinn, the sister, but it wasn't. It was actually the jinn. But the vast majority of cases, it will be the person. They come back. Give them some space now. They are going to feel like they have been beaten up. They are going to feel battered and bruised. It's extremely physically draining. Ruqya is physically draining on you as a Raqi through your recitation, and it's also physically draining on the patient. They feel like they have been involved in a fight, and many times they say, you know, I feel like I've been beaten up minus the bruises. So give them some space now. Don't jump on them. How are you feeling? Everything good? Give them some space. Give them some time to relax, to come back. Give them a drink of water. Just give them some space to just relax. Tell them to relax now. Say, you okay? Just relax. Give them a couple of minutes to relax. You take a break. You relax. You take some water. Relax your voice, etc. And just relax now. Now, the first thing that they're going to say is, what's wrong with me? Am I cured? Ya ikhwan, in my opinion, one of the greatest errors of the ruqa is that we are quick to diagnose, and we are ashamed to say, Allah knows best. We are ashamed to say, look, I'm not quite sure, but you need more ruqya. I'm not quite sure, but you should continue with your ruqya. There's no harm in saying this, because you know that the ruqya has had an effect by the permission of Allah. You don't need to pinpoint, it is sihr, and it was done on this day, and it was done by this person, and it's this type of sihr, it's this type of jinn, this type of effect. No. You know that this person is suffering, and you know whether the shifa, it lies within the Quran. So don't be afraid to say to the person, look, I'm not sure, I don't want to say, because if you say it's evil eye, and it's actually jinn possession, you're going to cause a lot of harm. If you say it's jinn possession and it's evil eye, you're going to cause a lot of damage. If you say it's magic and it's not, then imagine what the shaitan is now going to whisper to this person. You are possessed, you've got problems, you've got magic on you, and the person doesn't have magic, they have evil eye. So do not be afraid to just say, you know, just relax. I don't know, but come for another session. Here are some ayat of ruqya. Go away and perform the ruqya upon yourself. Important point now, ikhwan. One of the things that we fail to do, I apologize if you're going to mention this, but one of the things that we fail to do is we say, Alhamdulillah, you're cured, and the person stops ruqya. Alhamdulillah, there's nothing wrong, and the person stops ruqya. It's like, and I liken it to weeding. If you pull out the weed, you can pull out the top, but if the root is still there, then eventually it's going to come back, it's going to regrow. We're dealing with a case now. 4 years ago, the brother had ruqya. 4 years ago, he had ruqya. He thought that he had been cured, and now 4 years later, he is suffering much worse, and the jinn has come back. Because they didn't increase. What's wrong if the jinn leaves? If the jinn leaves and you're certain that the jinn has left, the person feels renewed, they feel cured, they feel wonderful by the permission of Allah. What's wrong with you saying, you know what, as a precautionary measure, I want you to do 1 more month of self-ruqya. As a precautionary measure, I want you to go and have cupping. As a precautionary measure, continue on with your self-ruqya. It's better to do too much, although you can't do too much recitation of Quran, but it's better to do a lot of recitation of Quran than it is to do too little and allow the problem to come back. So always encourage them, post-ruqya session, put your trust in Allah, do not associate any success with me, go away, and this shouldn't be the only ruqya that you have. Never ever make your ruqya the only ruqya that your patient has. because they should be supplementing your ruqya, rather the other way round, sorry. They should be supplementing their ruqya, which is 80%, with your ruqya. So you are just taking and you're just giving them a bit of momentum, you're giving them a bit of a push, rather the main impetus should come from themselves, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Couple of points just to finish this session off, inshaAllah ta'ala. One is a skill that you will need to develop, and I don't think you ever develop it completely, but it's a skill that is useful to develop, and you should endeavor to try to practice it, which is to recognize when the jinn has control of someone and when they come back to themselves. And I think this is something that you will learn over time, and it's something that you won't always get right. There will be times, like Abu Ibrahim mentioned, when you don't get it right and you think the person's come back to themselves. But in general, look at the eyes, look at the face, look at generally the person's demeanor, and just start to get, everyone's different, but just get those telltale signs from that individual that, oh, the person's come back, the jinns let go of them. And bear in mind that, ya ikhwan, please bear this in mind, that ruqya is peaks and troughs, in the sense that the jinn will come and scream and kick and shout and swear and spit, gone. Don't stop and say, oh, jinn's gone, alhamdulillah, keep on going. The jinn comes back again, it's another peak, kicking, screaming, spitting, swearing, down again. Person goes to sleep. If you can, try to keep the person fairly awake, keep them fairly conscious, okay? So you could have some smelling salts, you can have some red mist, like I'm going to talk about in a moment, some perfume or something that just makes them come back to themselves. Keep them awake if you can, even when the jinn is there. But there's times when they'll be dead to the world. One of the cases I had, subhanAllah, it's one of the hardest cases to deal with. It was very easy, it took a very short amount of time, bifadlillah. It took a very short amount of time. But the person just went dead. I actually thought I killed them. I actually honestly, genuinely thought that I had killed them. I said to the mahram, please check she's breathing. He said she's breathing. We poured water on her, she didn't react, not even move a bit. The mahram slapped her hand, she didn't react. He pinched her, she didn't react. Completely dead to the world, except that her heart was beating. And in the end, all you had to do is to make dua, to continue reading, to be patient, and over time she recovered. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best what happened. Some suggested that perhaps the jinn was knocked out in a situation where he was still in control of the body, so she became neither sort of like the jinn nor the person, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. This is just a hypothesis and an idea, and at the end of the day the knowledge is with Allah Azza wa Jal. But the reality is that it's useful to recognize the two, to watch when the person comes back to themselves, because sometimes, especially when you're spraying someone in the face with water and they come back to themselves, they often don't appreciate, die jinn, die, you know, and you're sort of spraying, and they say, it's me. So don't guarantee, don't rely upon it, because you'll get it wrong, but at the same time just be situationally aware. Also, just a reminder, just when we talked about the world of the jinn and we said the jinn are different types, the jinn are different types and they react in some ways to different supplementary things. Some will react more to water than others, depending on the circumstance, the person. Don't take it as a hard and fast thing. If water didn't work on the first session, that it won't work on the second. Be prepared to use it, be prepared to change, inshaAllah ta'ala. And bi'idhnillahi azza wa jal, you will develop your experience and develop your skill. Be calm and be relaxed about it, and inshaAllah ta'ala things will work out for you in the right way. Okay, we have 25 minutes left, and we have two major modules. We have three, but the third is a conclusion, and we can leave that until the ruqya case, inshallah. But we have questions, and we also have two modules to finish. So I'm just going to dive straight into a very, very quick module on prophetic and herbal medicine in ruqya. Some of the people may say, if you're reciting the Quran, why do you need anything else? The answer is you don't need anything else. But that there is knowledge in general medicine, the medicine of the Prophet ﷺ, and the knowledge of medicine that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given some of us, that may be of use to you in helping to facilitate the ruqya, It's not a replacement for the ruqya. Please, ya ikhwan, understand this. Herbal medicine, prophetic medicine is absolutely not a replacement for ruqya. It is an aid for ruqya. It's a supplementary use that you can benefit from, that you can help potentially, if you get it right, to get the jinn to leave a lot more quickly. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ made it clear that every illness has a cure. When the cure matches the illness, when the cure meets the illness exactly, the person is cured by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a jinn that is residing in the stomach, that is causing someone a great deal of problem, you may be able to give someone some herbal medicine that will help them to vomit, and that may enable them to more quickly progress through the stages. This is not something you need. If you don't understand it, you don't need it. It's just a supplementary aid that you can use, and there are some brothers who are incredibly gifted in this field, subhanallah. Some brothers who have a great deal of knowledge about herbal medicine and the medicine of the Prophet ﷺ. And this of course is something that Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah talked about in detail. Of course, one of the things we want to talk about before we talk about this is to mention the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, treat your sick with sadaqah. So one of the supplementary things that you can do is to encourage the family to give sadaqah. And this will help to purify yourself when you are not the recipient of the sadaqah, by encouraging them to give the sadaqah to, why don't you give it to some orphans, why don't you give it to the poor, why don't you give it sadaqah jariyah, give it to the local masjid. If the masjid has given you the permission to use the hall, say, look, you know what it is, I don't charge for my ruqya, but you know, subhanallah, why don't you just pop something as much or as little as you like in the box of the masjid to help them pay for the electricity and so on and so forth. This will help to purify your intention, because you've confirmed that you're not getting any gain out of it, and also it will help to cure their sick, cure your sick with sadaqah. Okay? So there are supplementary things that you can do. Now we're going to cover a great number of things, and I'm going to mention them in a limited amount of detail. I'm not going to give you too much in terms of prescriptions and amounts. Please be careful. Please be careful, ya ikhwan. There is herbal medicine that can cause people a great deal of harm. If you don't know what you're doing, don't use it. You don't need it. But once you develop a degree of understanding, you can help yourself with supplementary aids for ruqya. We said one of the supplementary aids for ruqya is physical pressure. Not beating severely, but physical pressure. Following the jinn around in the body when it's permissible to do so, i.e. when it doesn't involve the women. You can follow the jinn around in the body, and this is something that Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah was extremely keen to recommend to do, to put gentle pressure, to make it difficult for the jinn to reside in one place, to make it difficult for the jinn to move around freely around the body, to keep on. This can be in the form of a gentle massage, the form of light pressure on the place. Again, you don't need it. If you don't know how to do it, don't do it, because you're going to cause somebody harm. When you develop a bit of knowledge about it, it's something that you can add into your ruqya to help speed things up. From the things that is a supplementary aid, ruqya audio of the Quran that has been recorded with the intention of ruqya. I have a couple. I recommend Shaykh al-Ajami, Ali al-Ajami's ruqya audio has been usually quite beneficial, and likewise Shaykh Luhaydan, Muhammad al-Luhaydan has some audio which is also quite beneficial. Ruqya audio, again, it's a supplementary aid. You don't replace your ruqya and their ruqya with MP3s. But if you want to supplement ruqya with some ruqya audio, listen to this. They're traveling in the car, someone's driving them to your house, and you have them put the earphones in and just listen. Or you say when you go to sleep at night for half an hour, when they're too tired to read the Quran, pop the earphones in, have a listen. It's not the same as real ruqya, because ruqya is on the breath, ruqya is in the recitation and the blowing and all of the other things. But at the end of the day, it's a supplementary aid that you can use and you can help yourself with. If you've got too many patients, you've had a double booking, let one maybe listen to some ruqya audio while you're dealing with the other one. These are all things that you can just balance and use in a balanced way, okay? There are many herbs and medicines. From the herbs and medicines, in no particular order, includes things like saffron, things like bath salts, There are some very, very good bath salts that are made up of certain herbs and things like that, and we're inshallah going to try to provide some recipes to you at a later date inshallah as we're developing them for some things. You can put them in the bath, the person can bathe themselves. It may help to weaken the jinn and just generally to give the body a bit of a prep in preparation for your ruqya. And in general, one of the ruqa, he advised me, and I do think this is good advice, is try to prepare your patients before they come. Get them to recite some on themselves, get someone else reciting on them, bit of ruqya audio maybe a bath in some bath salts, maybe some oil rubbed on them that's been recited. Get them prepared so that you can very quickly get to the point where the jinn is reacting, if you can and when you can. Ruqya water we've already mentioned. Same ayat as we've talked about before, the same stuff that you recite. When you recite, you blow. One of the techniques that some of the shuyukh in Saudi Arabia use for the ruqya audio, for the ruqya water is very good, is that they have their own bottle of water and they leave it a quarter empty. And usually it's Zamzam. And what they do is the patient brings their own bottle of Zamzam to the ruqya session. And what the shaykh he does is he's constantly reading over the water all the time. In his general recitation, in his ruqya, he's got the water there, he's blowing in it every now and again. What he does is, he pours the water from the patient into the bottle, so it's all mixed up. Then he pours it back out. So the bottle that's been given to the patient has been recited on, sometimes Al-Baqarah has been recited over it 10 times. Because of the amount the shaykh's been reading, poured a bit in, poured a bit out, poured a bit in, poured a bit out. And that is just a little technique some of the shuyukh use. You can feel free to use it or not to use it. It's a technique that some of the shuyukh in Saudi use, and it helps to maintain sort of, effective ruqya water that you can use to spray, to give them to drink, and so on and so forth. Some of the things that are mentioned regarding ayn, some people treat ayn with seawater baths and sea salt baths. Again, this is something that hasn't got a great deal of evidence from the sunnah, but you feel free as a medicine, as a herbal medicine, to try sea salt and to try seawater bath if you wish. Truffles are also reportedly very good for ayn. Some of the ulama base this on the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said that the truffle is a shifa for the eye. And they said, most of the scholars of hadith, they translate the word shifa as shifa for the eye, the actual eye, as in you put the water in your eye. But some of the ulama, they said the word eye is general and it can include the evil eye. So we'll talk about preparing truffles. The problem with truffles is they're very, very expensive. And I don't want you to waste a huge amount of money on, supplementary medicine when you have the Quran and it's free. Honey, major important thing. Get them drinking good quality honey, not nasty cheap supermarket sugar honey. Manuka honey is very good. Likewise, Sidr honey is very good, but generally good quality honey that is of a very high quality. If you go to the supermarket, maybe I quite commonly buy the Manuka honey, 6+, 10+ Manuka honey. It's not the only thing, but it is a very high quality kind of honey. Things like rose water, sometimes they put in the bath. We know we use the rose water to clean. And in general, I think rose water, rather than being a cure of its own, is useful because anything that is a nice smell and anything that's quite perfumey, a lot of the jinn, they don't like it. They don't like nice smells. They don't like things like that. So you can use perfume. You can, obviously, with the brothers, you can use these blocks, red blocks of misk. You get them in a lot of Pakistani, they're made in Pakistan, and you get them in a lot of Asian shops. They're kind of like red square blocks and they smell quite strong. They're like a soap and they're kind of red blocks of misk. And these are quite useful. You can put it up the patient's nose. They don't like it at all. You can use it like smelling salts. If you don't like the smell of smelling salts, you can rub the red misk cubes under their nose and the jinn will usually wake up very severely. Black seed. The black seed is a cure for everything except for death. Use the oil, but use good quality oil. Use ground seeds that you give to people. We're going to talk about some recipes later, Use the whole seeds, 7 whole seeds, and drink with the honey water. Very, very beneficial, okay? Cupping is from the major causes of cure. We now, myself and Abu Ibrahim, cupping is an integral part of our ruqya. It's too long to talk about cupping now, but we have with us a brother, if he has some time, he may be able to share some time with us. We have a hijam with us who, mashallah, has performed hijama on someone today, and maybe he'll be able to share some time to answer some of your questions on cupping. So it's useful for a Raqi to learn how to cup, And it's useful to have a good hajjam on hand who you can refer people to, male and female, because you're going to need a woman to do the women and a man to do the men. So you have a male and female hijama, and you may integrate the hijama with the ruqya. So you do the hijama just before the ruqya, or you do a little bit of ruqya and then you begin the hijama to try to encourage the jinn to come out through the blood. From the herbs that is said to be useful against the jinn is asafoetida. Don't ask me how to spell it. I believe in Urdu it's called hing. Asafoetida, and it's a garlic substitute. And again, some people use it in some of the medicine that they give. It's a herb. It's not, people will turn and say, you can't use this, you can't use it. It's a herb, it's a medicine. It's like giving someone paracetamol. It's up to you what you use. It's a simple herb. You may find benefit in it, you may not find any benefit in it. From the benefit is al-qist al-hindi. Al-qist al-hindi and al-qist al-bahri. Costus, Indian costus and white costus. Both of them can be made into a little mixture and used for nose drops. They can be given as part of a ruqya program, and they can often be very, very beneficial. Generally, I've used red Indian costus and put it into a little bit of water, a little bit of oil, and used it as a nose drop. It can be very, very, very effective in causing the jinn to react very severely. And again, these are things that you can learn by, spending some time with the ruqa. There are different types of misk you can use to wake the jinn up. Makkah musk, the red musk we talked about. We talked about ajwa dates. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever eats in the morning 7 ajwa dates, and there are 7, you can remember this, I think, off the top of my head, there are 7 different wordings of this hadith. 7 dates and 7 different wordings of the hadith. From the wording of the hadith are ajwa dates. Will not be harmed by sihr or poison on that day. Ajwa dates. Ajwa dates from Aliyatul Medina. Dates from Medina. Regular dates. There are many wordings of the hadith. My advice to you is this. If you can get ajwa dates from an area of Medina called Al-Aliyah, Aliyatul Medina, that's the area towards Masjid Quba in Medina, then do so. If you can't, get any ajwa dates. If you can't, get any Medina dates. If you can't, get regular dates, bismillah. 7 dates, eat them with believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it a cure for you. Allah Azza wa Jal will cause the sihr not to affect you on that day. Beware that a patient who is severely affected by sihr will often hide them. We have a lot of fun giving patients ajwa dates. 5 go in the mouth, 2 go on the floor. 2 go in the mouth, 1 gets fingers in the mouth, vomit them up again. Yeah, so they don't like to have them. Ajwa dates. Okay, olive oil we mentioned. I recommend cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, the highest quality. And I personally recommend from Palestine for the simple reason that Palestine is a land that Allah Azza wa Jal described as being mubarakah in the Quran. A land which is full of barakah. The tree is barakah and the land is barakah. So if you can get the oil that is from the tree of barakah in the land of barakah, then this is something good. But inshallah, any olive oil of good quality will be something useful. Some of the ulama, they use ground rhubarb. And again, this is in some of the recipes, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. So we use senna and sidr. Senna is something which is what they call a purgative medicine. It causes you to have diarrhea and it causes you to have loose bowels. They give you senna tablets when you have constipation, okay? I'm talking about senna leaves. What you're going to do is, you're going to boil a pan and you're going to put some senna leaves in the pan. A pinch, a handful, a teaspoon, whatever. And you're going to boil them in the pan for some time, and then you're going to leave it, and you usually leave it from Isha until Fajr. You can give them right away, but the way I was taught to do it is to leave it from Isha until Fajr, and then at Fajr you give them this, you fish out the leaves and you give them this kind of yellowy senna water to drink. Do not give it to them repeatedly day after day after day. Couple of days, 3 days, do not give it to them repeatedly, you will cause them damage, okay? Try and give them the senna for a couple of days. The senna tablets have written on, and I don't like the senna tablets, I prefer to make the mixture, but the senna tablets, especially if you make the mixture with zamzam or ruqya water, but the senna tablets have on them, do not take them repeatedly, okay? So give people a bit of a break. Sidr, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that 7 leaves of the sidr tree, that's the lotus tree, and it's also called lotus and lot. I found both of them. And the sidr, you take 7 leaves. If you can't get the 7 leaves because they're all broken up into pieces, just use a teaspoon and say Bismillah. But you try to get 7 leaves as much as you can. You can give some of the water, you put them in water, you mix them up, you give the person to drink some, and some of them you put it in the bath. And this was the advice of Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala, to drink some of it and to put some of it in the bath. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is that sidr is effective against magic, okay? There are some other purgative medicines that you can give people, like sal ammoniac and some other things, which basically cause people to have diarrhea. It's not very nice. Don't give them in large amounts. Be careful. It's someone's body you're playing with. If you don't know what you're doing, just stick with the ruqya of the Quran. If you know what you're doing, then as you develop some knowledge in this, you can stick to some recipes people have given. And likewise, emetics like ibcap, things that cause people to vomit. There is some particular brothers who make herbal concoctions that are deadly. You know, we have this brother, mashallah, tabarakallah, he gives us a little bit of powder. We give it to the patients in some mango juice. Within 10 minutes, that patient will be vomiting and vomiting and vomiting and severe diarrhea for something like 48 hours. You do not use this at random, or I'll try it and see how it goes. But when you see the stomach is bulging and the person is desperate to vomit, and they actually, sometimes they'll faint because how much they want to vomit, you can give them something that is an emetic that will cause them to vomit, and so perhaps they will vomit up some of the sihr, and you will see things come out. We have a sister who we read upon who gets green things, random shapes and things that just come out of her nose, bits of hair, fur balls, all sorts of stuff. So you beware of what you might see. Very, very briefly, there are some recipes. I'll just give you an example, and you know, don't worry about writing it all down, inshallah. You can catch the video, inshallah ta'ala. One of the recipes that I was given, which I find it quite useful, is to take 1/2 kilogram of honey and to add a tablespoon of ground black seed, a tablespoon of ground senna, a tablespoon of ground rhubarb, and a tablespoon of ground cumin, to mix them all up together, and to take a tablespoon of the mixture with a glass of ruqya water every morning. I'm not going to repeat it, Habib, inshallah. I'll repeat it to you afterwards, bismillah, because of the time. We literally have 8 minutes and we have another module to fill. 1/2 kilogram of honey, tablespoon of ground black seed, tablespoon of ground senna, tablespoon of ground rhubarb, tablespoon of ground cumin. Mix them all together. You'll get a big honey mush. Put them in the honey pot. Take a tablespoon of that honey mixture every morning and put it into a glass of ruqya water. Stir it around, dissolve it, warm the water up a bit, dissolve it in the water, give it to the person to drink. It's very, very useful. It contains a number of things that are cures in the sunnah. From this is the advice of Sheikh Adil Al-Muqbil. He has a 7-day program. You can find it on my website, muhammadtim.com, muhammadtim.com. And Sheikh has a 7-day program which involves reciting on olive oil, putting it on at night, washing it off in the morning, putting ruqya water over yourself in the morning, and drinking ruqya water 3 times a day with honey and black seed. It's very, very, very useful. It's very effective, and it does help to break down the magic or break down the jinn problem. And it helps to get rid of the evil eye as well, because it contains honey, which is a cure, contains black seed, which is a cure, contains olive oil, which is a blessed tree that is a cure, and it contains ruqya water, which is a cure. So it contains a number of different cures, and the instructions are on the website. As for preparing the truffles, this is the last thing I'll talk about. The problem with truffles is they're very expensive, but if you do use them, the problem is preserving them. There's 2 ways to preserve them. One is to cut them up and put them into a brown paper bag and leave them in the fridge, and they become rock hard. And the other way is to cut them into tiny cubes, put them into some good quality olive oil, and freeze them in the freezer. When you want to use them, you defrost the thing and you take a single piece out. You take a small cube, something like a square centimeter sort of cube. You chop it up really, really, really small, puree it, drop it into some water, boil it up in the water, and give people a mint teacup, you know, like a little finjal, a little mint teacup. You give them about twice a day of the truffle, and people who suffer from severe ayn have found a great deal of benefit in it. But I advise you again, these are supplementary medicines. They may help, they may not, they may work, they may not. The Quran is your ultimate cure and the ultimate thing that you're concerned with. Continuing straight away into the last topic, and we're going to try and have a system for dealing with the questions inshallah later on. But we have 5 minutes until Salah. I'm going to split this between myself and Brother Abu Ibrahim regarding innovations and bad practice in Ruqya. We've mentioned a number of them already. From the types that we're going to talk about are things like people talking about visualizations, visual ruqya. Imagine you're beating the jinn up in your mind. I put the jinn in a bottle. Any kind of weirdness that you hear, take it with a pinch of salt. You know, when you hear weirdness, you hear Iraqi and he ties the person's fingers and toes and then he makes them blow into a bottle and he says the jinn is in the bottle. Whenever you hear someone who says he has control over the jinn, be careful. The Prophet ﷺ was shy to tie up the jinn in the masjid because he remembered the dua of Sulaiman alayhi salam. So do not get into these innovative practices, weird things, controlling the jinn, seeking help from the jinn. From those people, and I'm not shy to say, walillahi alhamd, from those people who seek help from the jinn is this man who comes from France and his name is bin Halima. This person is someone who is mustaghithun bis shaitan. He seeks the help of the jinn and the shaitan. I'm not going to say he does it deliberately. Allahu alam, he does it deliberately or not. But I followed his situation for a number of years, I think now. And from this, I have sent a brother to go and see him. And I have been there when he was there in performing the ruqya. And the brother I sent, he's knowledgeable about these issues, and we looked at the evidence and we came to the conclusion that this is a person who seeks the help of the shaitan. This is a person, whether he knows it or not, whether the shaitan have just confused him or whether he actually knows it, he is mustaghithun bil jinn. He is someone who is seeking the help of the jinn, and he brings the jinn to tell people what is wrong with them, and he says that he can catch the jinn by reading Aynama takunu ya'ti bikum Allahu jami'a. Say, MashaAllah, you're the first one in the universe to be able to do this. The Prophet ﷺ did not do it, and the Sahaba did not do it, and the major Imams of Ruqya like Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim didn't do it, but MashaAllah, bin Halima is the first person, MashaAllah, tabarakallah, who is able to capture the jinn through this ayah. In reality, we saw the people he hangs around with. They're all people who seek help with the jinn and the shaitan. They're all people who do these kind of practices. So we're not frightened to warn about them. And if they have some issues with that, they can come and see us and we will demonstrate to them what it is that we mean. Bi-idhnillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala. Do not be fooled, ya ikhwan, about success of a raqi who is not upon the sunnah. For two reasons. Number one, we know that success can come through haram ways and halal ways, but only the halal way is true success. For example, the magician may be able to remove a jinn by sending a jinn that is more powerful. I saw a video recently of a priest, a Coptic priest in Egypt. He goes with the cross and the Muslims come to him, subhanallah. The Muslims come to him and they say, perform ruqya upon me, O priest. And he touches them with the cross and he says, in the name of Isa, I cure you. And the jinn is thinking, MashaAllah, this is a field day. Khalas, my only job was to make this person commit shirk. They committed shirk, I'm off. Or he has a jinn with him that is more powerful than their jinn, and they take that jinn out by force, and he says, you are cured, now accept this religion of Christianity. Likewise, there is another reason why people may be successful when they're not upon the sunnah. And we're not talking about the Christians here, but we're talking about some of the Muslims who their practices are not correct. They have some innovative practices in their ruqya. But because they are fighting against the shaitan, and because they are trying to do their best, Allah Azza wa Jal gives them a degree of success. That doesn't mean what they do is right. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah mentions this group when he says, how can the Asha'ira, those people who twist the names and attributes of Allah, be successful in jihad fi sabilillah? Ibn Taymiyyah mentions at length why the Asha'ira are successful in jihad fi sabilillah. In this case, he said, they were fighting against the enemies of Allah Azza wa Jal from the worst of the people, and the people who came to kill the Muslims. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them a degree of success by the fact that they were trying to do something for the sake of Allah. But does that mean that because an Ash'ari won a battle, the likes of Salah ad-Din rahimahullah, or someone like this won a battle, that means that we should all become Asha'ira? Absolutely not. Just because a Iraqi is successful in something, judge his practices by the Quran and by the Sunnah. In this, look at innovative practices, ruqya, that involves elements of magic. You see someone with the Star of David and he puts it on their head and he reads the Quran. Think, where does the Star of David come from? Where did you get the Star of David from? We saw it in the books of the magicians. Be careful of this kind of thing. And there are many things I wanted to mention, but looking at the time, I just want to give our brother Abu Ibrahim a couple of minutes to add to some of the stories and his experiences and some of the things that he's noticed regarding innovations and bad practices. And maybe we can just have a word about money and ruqa, who take a great deal of money for what they do.
Okay, Ikhwan, one of the bad practices involved in this ruqya, in this field of ruqya, we mentioned that two of the biggest trials that are going to come upon you as Araqi is the trial of women and the trial of money. The trial of women and the trial of money. One of the bad practices that we have, ya Ikhwan, is these people who they take advantage of our brothers and sisters at their time of need, and they charge them not tens, not 20s, not hundreds, ya Ikhwan, thousands of pounds. We have examples of people reciting for half an hour, charging £1,000 for half an hour worth of recitation. Ya Ikhwan, this is something which the people have unfortunately turned the field of ruqya into a business. We've noticed a huge amount of people practicing ruqya in the last few years. Why? Because there's a gap in the market. Whenever there is a gap in the market, whenever there is a demand, people are going to come, fill that gap. They are fraudsters, they are cowboys, they are juhal, they are ignorant, and they have no knowledge of this field in reality, or very little. Yet subhanallah, we have them starting ruqya clinics. They are becoming qualified Islamic practitioners in inverted commas, and they are taking our brothers and sisters for a ride. Now this should make me and you even more motivated to get out and help our brothers and sisters fi sabilillah. There is nothing wrong with taking your expenses, so you have traveled 20 miles or 20 minutes or whatever it may be. There is nothing wrong with requesting that, so that you yourself are not at a financial loss. You're doing this for the sake of Allah Jalla wa Ala. There is nothing wrong with this. There is nothing wrong with requesting your expenses for ruqya. There is nothing wrong if the person gifts you something, so you go, you perform that ruqya, and the person as a means of their gesture of their appreciation, they give you some money. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this. But ya Ikhwan, if somebody asks you, do you charge? And you say, no, Yani, I don't charge, but you can give me a gift. Subhanallah. We have people like this. I don't charge, but you can give me a gift. So now this person is going to feel cheap if they don't give you something, and in reality, in a roundabout way, you have requested payment. We see from that hadith that we mentioned, there's nothing wrong with accepting some payment for your ruqya. But ya Ikhwan, this is one of the biggest doors to fitna that you as Araqi will face. One of the biggest doors to fitna, to misguidance, to insincerity is the door of charging. How many a good Raqi and how many a person was doing this for the sake of Allah was extremely successful. The people began to gather around them, the people began to visit them, the people began to seek their aid in this after the aid of Allah. And so the shaitan, he came to these people through the door of charging money, and now they charge £200-300 for one session of ruqya. Another thing that you need to be aware of with regards to charging is these people, their sincerity, subhanallah, it begins, we may be able to question their sincerity as a result of, they will say, we mentioned 50 minutes into the session, the jinn begins to surface. After 1 hour, they say, sorry, I've got another patient coming, and they kick you out and they bring somebody else in, and that's another 50, 60, 70 pounds, whatever it may be. I advise you, brothers and sisters, if you even think that ruqya may be a source of income for you, where you may quit your job and make it a source of income, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do not go into it. Only do ruqya if you have a stable income. This is my personal advice. Only do ruqya if you have a stable external income which is not linked with ruqya, and you are doing ruqya for the sake of Allah. Because wallahi, if you do it for the sake of Allah, Allah will bless you with gardens underneath which rivers flow. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless you with palaces in Jannah bi-idhnillah. We hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us the death of martyrs bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. So the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is much greater than 20, 30, 40, 500, 6,000, 10,000 pounds, ya ikhwan. Do it sincerely for the sake of Allah. I advise you, brothers, do not request payment, but if you are given a gift, no problem. But it's okay for you to request your expenses and things like this. Just close this door to fitna. Close this door to fitna. Just like we close the door to fitna with the mahram being present, I advise you brothers and sisters, close this door to fitna. Just take out, you look at your schedule. I can take out 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours doing ruqya for the sake of Allah. Whatever you can spare in your week for the sake of Allah, then I advise you brothers and sisters to engage in ruqya fi sabilillah. But if you want to recoup some of your expenses, then there's no problem, inshallah, if our brother has anything to add in this.
I think now is the time for